There's a big controversy right now going on in the gaming community. The last 2 days have been pretty topsy-turvy. We talked about this last week, but the Game Awards are about to announce their Game of the Year nominees tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So tomorrow, at this very same time and place, we will be discussing those. But in regards to the Game Awards, there's a few things going on right now that people are really upset about. And we need to discuss these today because I feel this is going to be pretty interesting in regards to how the Game Awards are received this year. All right. Normally, the Game Awards are received well, and then you have some criticism. I've criticized the Game Awards for many years. You know, number one, I always have been a big critic of how they vote on games for Game of the Year and these categories. It's a jury. Well, who's in the jury? Well, hand-picked games media, a few hand-picked creators. Basically, it's like friends of Jeff Keighley. Like, that's great, but what about people who are qualified? Or what about a common vote? Well, they have a common vote, and it barely factors in. Case in point, there's been years where the jury all vote for one game, and the common vote literally goes 100% in another direction. Notably, it was the year of The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, where the common vote was almost like 95% for Ghost of Tsushima. I take that back. I think it was like 80%. And so it should have won, but they all gave it to Last of Us 2 anyway, because the journalists wanted to vote for the feel-good Druckmann liberal game, which is stupid because it was a good game and should have been voted on for the right reasons, but that's why they did that. So, yeah, like, I've always had criticisms of this show. It's too long. It's boring as dirt. You could tell it's done because he wants to make money. And also the timing. That's another big thing about the Game Awards, right? The Game Awards take place the first week of December. I think this year it's the second week of December, okay? But there's a problem. The second week of December is not the end of the year. So any game that basically comes out between now and the end of the year is not up for contention for Game of the Year. I want to repeat myself. Any game coming out between now and the end of the year is not in contention because the Game of the Year nominees come out tomorrow. So that means no Flight Simulator, no Stalker 2, no Indiana Jones, no Marvel Rivals, and anything else, because I only mentioned the 4 that are at the top of my head. Any other games that came out between now and the end of the year cannot possibly win an award. And you might say, well, that's not true because Mr. Keighley claims that those games can be eligible for next year. No one thinks about those games next year. A game that comes out in a given year is thought about in that year. You're not going to have, what if Microsoft Flight Simulator blows you away? It will not win an award next year. No one will think about it, nominate it, or vote for it. Okay? So essentially, it's a rigged show. It always has been. It's been a bullshit show where the people voting aren't legit. It's skewed to one side by far. And you eliminate games from the running because of the timing. You might say, well, why does he time the Game Awards like that? Money. This is the biggest advertisement revenue time of the year. If he wants to make money on ads, he has to do the show during the holiday season. And no one's going to want to fly out there and do it Christmas week. So he has to get it in within the first 1 or 2 weeks of December, bank on all that revenue, and then run out like a madman, rich as shit. It's 100%. 100%. And it's stupid because he wants it to be legit. And I don't think that, a lot of people think Jeff Keighley is like a heinous villain. I don't think he's a heinous villain. He's got a track record of being in games as a games journalist for a long time. Then he became kind of semi-wealthy doing it and started investing in shows like this, and they took off. I don't think the guy's bad. I just think that he does things in a way that definitely could be done better, and he doesn't listen to criticism because he feels like he is the guy now. You know, with E3 dead, he feels like he's the guy to go to for game news and information, and that he's above reproach. So this year, he is under the most fire he's ever been for the Game Awards. Are you ready? Here's why. So, by the way, I have some shout-outs to do, and I promise you I will do them, but I kind of want to get into the meat of this story. 2 tips have come in. I will shout out those tips in a bit, but I want to get into the meat of this story, okay? So, here's what's going on. Okay, number 1, this year, and this is the first time this has ever happened on the Game Awards, this section has shown up on the Game Awards website. Ready? Are DLCs, expansion packs, and remakes or remasters eligible? The Game Awards aims to recognize the best creative and technical work each year, irrespective of the format of that content's release. Expansion packs, new game seasons, DLCs, remakes, and remasters are eligible in all categories if the jury deems the new creative and technical work to be worthy of a nomination. Factors such as the newness of the content and its price and value should be taken into consideration. Okay? So what does that mean? Up until this year, you'd never seen anyone say, oh, a DLC could be Game of the Year. Right? You really haven't. It never happened. Or a remake or remaster. That's always been a thing of contention for me. I remember a few years ago, I said that Resident Evil 2 Remake was my Game of the Year. And a lot of people said, that's not possible. A remake cannot be a Game of the Year. To which I said, there's a difference. Because there's different kinds of remakes. Some remakes are just graphical facelifts, right? Oh, the graphics are slightly improved, but they don't really do anything to tweak the gameplay to make it better. The story's exactly the same. The music, the voice acting's the same. Just instead of being a 720p game on the Xbox 360, now it's a 1080p or 4K game on a modern console. That's a graphical facelift. And to be honest, I don't think that should be eligible for Game of the Year. You're basically riding on the work and the coattails of people who came before you, and you just did some tweaks, right? However, if you look at some of these awesome modern remakes we've had, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and this year, Silent Hill 2 Remake, these are games that were remade from the ground up. This is a brand new game that does have similar story elements, similar puzzles, and similar gameplay to the originals, but they are definitely new games. If you play Silent Hill 2, the original, and you play the remake, yeah, you're going to say, well, I know this story, but you're going to get more aspects to the story, new endings, and the gameplay elements have been completely changed, and the game looks completely different. It's a new game. So in that case, I definitely think that those kind of remakes should be eligible. DLCs, now here is where we start getting into a hairy business, okay? There is a very good reason why we're talking about this year, folks. I've already mentioned it on this very podcast. This year has been an incredibly underwhelming year for games. There's been, first of all, way too many RPGs. And when you have so many games in one category all coming out within 1 year, what happens is they all overshadow each other. They all become a haze. They all become almost indiscernible from each other. There's been so many RPGs this year of high profile that none of them really were able to shine. Like a Dragon Infinite Well, the Persona 3 Remake, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Dragon's Dogma 2, Dragon Age Veilguard, Metaphor, Dragon Quest 3 Remake. And that's 8. And I just thought off the top of my head. I guarantee you there's probably another 10 that I didn't mention. Okay? Now here's the thing. I like RPGs. I think that they're great. I really do. I grew up playing them, immersed in games like Final Fantasy 2 and 3, which is now 4 and 6 respectively, and then playing like Final Fantasy 7 on PS1, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, even top-down RPGs that are more action-based like Zelda. Listen, I'm there. I love those games. However, if 10 of them, 12 of them came out in 1 year, I'd probably have an issue. I'd be like, all right, it's too much of the same. And that's the problem. This year, it seemed like game developers just did not give a crap about their environment and what was coming out. They just dumped upon us an insane amount of the same genre of game to the point where it's a sea of them. And now they're all melded together, indiscernible. And what's happened is, I feel like they've lost their luster. Last year, Baldur's Gate 3 stood out. The diamond in the rough. It was so far above the other RPGs that came out last year that you knew that was going to be the game that everyone was going to be talking about for Game of the Year. I mean, it destroyed its competition like Starfield and shit like that. It crushed it into fucking dust, right? It really was the best RPG in a very long time. This year, can you tell me one RPG that stood out above all the others? Some people would say Metaphor. I would tend to agree. In the 12 hours I played a Metaphor, it felt like Persona 5 plus plus plus. It just felt like there were all these improvements upon the formula of Persona 5. Okay? So for me, it's probably Metaphor, but even then, you could argue, well, but it's very similar to Persona 5 in most ways, and I can't disagree there. You know, it really feels like this year, RPGs flooded the market, and what's happened is normally you'd see 1 or 2 really good RPGs in a year, and then people would be like, Game of the Year contenders. But because there's been 12 RPGs of that stature this year, everyone's like, nothing stands out. So what you're faced with is a year where you got a few games, like, for example, Silent Hill 2 Remake. That stands out for me. Outstanding game, right? But really, for most people, they'll be like, well, I really liked Helldivers 2. Yeah, well, you know, I really liked, you know, Silent Hill Remake. Well, I really liked Metaphor. Well, I actually really like Black Ops 6, but there's no consensus. It's just all over the place this year. There's no one definitive game that people are pointing to and going like, Game of the Year. Instead, it's like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I didn't even play that one. But, you know, I really liked this one. And it's all over. But what did actually come out this year and stand out and make record sales numbers and everything? Guess what? A DLC by the name of Shadow of the Erdtree for Elden Ring. And if you haven't paid attention, FromSoft Games get their asses kissed, get their balls massaged, they get fluffed on the Game Awards. I mean, Sekiro won Game of the Year, for God's sakes, and that's arguably, in my opinion, the worst game FromSoft's made in the Soulsborne style category. Okay? So, the way I see it, the whole reason that we've got this as a spot of contention this year is because Jeff Keighley has every intention of naming Shadow of the Erdtree a Game of the Year nominee. We're going to find out tomorrow, but I almost guarantee you that's why this blurb was added to the Game Awards this year, because he wants Silent Hill 2 Remake and Shadow of the Erdtree to be 2 of his Game of the Year nominees, but you couldn't do that unless you made it clear that they were eligible, right? So that's definitely what I'm seeing, all right? However, people are very upset about this. Just to give you some examples, if you just scroll down, DLC should be its own award. Remakes, remasters its own, including them for all categories, is an insult to any fully new game. All this just so you can give Elden Ring 2 Game of the Years. This is stupid as hell. There should be a category for DLCs and expansions. This means that they're nominating Elden Ring again. This is pretty much an excuse for Elden Ring, see? So exactly what I just said, it's exactly right. And that's how everyone feels. That basically this is a whole shill idea. He wants Elden Ring to be in there. And if he didn't put that in there, the jury wouldn't vote. So this is the first of 3 pieces of controversial stuff going on. Okay? Number 2. Who is the jury? Who is this nameless, formless group of people who vote in the categories for the Game of the Year award, or Game Awards? It's just Game Awards, by the way. Not Game of the Year awards, it's just Game Awards. Well, guess what? Previous years, the voting jury would be listed on the website. See archive today. This is from previous years. And the jury would be mainstream gaming media such as Game Informer and stuff like that. Of course, Game Informer doesn't even exist anymore. But it would also be like big time other news outlets, Ars Technica, Entertainment Weekly, the LA Times. Keighley would also handpick the games media that he felt should be in it. So, for example, he has PC Gamer and Polygon there, but he doesn't have others. Okay? Also, there would be, no exaggeration, here's a year, things that essentially have nothing to do with gaming, like Pride.com. That's an activist website for, guess what? You know, gay pride. So it's like, why would they be voting on Game Awards, right? So what happened over the years is that these awards got more and more into question. Why don't the gamers vote? Well, they do, but the gamer vote is minuscule. Like, it's like the common vote counts for like 10%, while these other sites are determining the winners of all of these awards. Like, how does that make any sense? Shouldn't the gamers themselves who are buying and playing the games be the ones to determine who wins? It's kind of like the Academy Awards or the Oscars, where they've got this secret club of people who get to vote, and they determine the winners. But half the time, the movies that win, you don't even know what the fuck they are. You never heard of them. In the meanwhile, the movies that have made the most money or the most popular and everyone liked almost always get snubbed. So it's kind of the same deal at this point, right? Now, last year, Baldur's Gate 3 across the board was the game that got nominated and voted on. So in that regard, it's not like, oh, you know, there was an issue. But this year, in a year when we don't have a definitive game that's number one standing above all others, this year's going to be this kind of a problem. But here's the funny part about this year, folks. Guess what? They didn't bother listing the jury this year. This year, we actually have no idea who's voting for the awards at the Game Awards. It's completely been hidden, and no disclosure has been given whatsoever. Could it be? Could it be that we just had an election in the United States that literally every body of government is now going to be dominated by Republicans, i.e. conservatives, but Jeff Keighley and all his buddies who are in the voting are left-leaning, right? You don't see a Fox News on here. You don't see anyone in a conservative sphere here. In fact, a lot of these you can point out, oh, leftist. And again, this isn't DS politics, but this is gaming. It seems like he is pushing his agenda onto his Game Awards show, okay? And that's not good. It's supposed to be a show that recognizes the best games of the year, not the games that they feel are pushing their agendas. And it seems like that's what they're voting. I mean, again, Last of Us 2 swept the Game Awards in 2020 when people were saying, no, I don't think so, right? And in fact, if you take a look, I mean, Grums is, just for the record, Grums is a very, very conservative person on X. But he's basically just calling out, take a look at how each one of these, you know, is not in line with the common gamer's values these days, right? Look, Wukong and Stellar Blade will be snubbed. Dragon Age Veilguard will be lauded and propped up. That's going to be crazy. If Dragon Age Veilguard gets pushed into, like, Game of the Year contention, when the common gamer is saying it's not good and it didn't even sell well, if you guys don't know, I think they're saying that it sold something like, I think they were saying it sold, what was it, 10 million? It didn't sell that much, and they were saying it needs to sell like 4 times more copies to even be in the realm of profitability. So a game that's not selling, and in general, people who bought it don't really like it, that's going to become a Game of the Year contender, supposedly, right? That's just crazy to me. Is it only 1 million? Holy shit, I thought it was 10 million. Someone says, no, it just broke 1 million in sales. That's crazy. Anyway, so this year, number one, DLCs and remakes are now eligible for Game of the Year. Number two, the jury voting for Game of the Year is hidden. We don't know at all who the heck the jury is. They hid it, and they're not saying this year who it is. And then on top of all of that, okay, just to put the icing on the cake, just to put the cherry on top of this shit sundae that is the Game Awards at this point, okay? If you're not aware, this just happened. Jeff Keighley is attempting to trademark the term Game Awards with the U.S. Patent Office. If this goes through and he gets a patent on Game Awards, it means no one else will be able to host an award show with the words Game Awards in it, of any scope. Like, if he gets this patent, I literally can't say, it's DSP's Game Awards for 2024. He could actually hit me and say, no, I own the patent, I'm going to sue you. Take down your video, take down your stream. You would have to say, Game of the Year Awards. You would have to say, Best Games Countdown. You would literally have to change the title of this. You understand? How crazy is that? This reminds me, if you remember years ago, this was many years ago, like 2017, okay? There was this group of creators on YouTube called the Fine Brothers. Now, no one knew who they were. because they were behind the scenes financiers and producers of the series Elders React, Kids React, Teens React. Do you remember those shows and how big they were on YouTube at the time? That was over 7 years ago. Well, the Fine brothers flew too close to the sun, like Icarus and his wings, and the wax melted and they plummeted into the sea because they actually tried to, I forget if it was trademark or patent, the actual concept of the React video. Okay? So basically what they tried to do is say, if you make content that's React, well, we own the rights to that. So you can't do that. Anyone who made any React content, they would have had legal grounds to say, oh, no, you can't call it a React because we own the rights to reacting on YouTube. So you have to call it something different. You could call it responds or retorts or, you know, pill stream. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. I had some indigestion there and it just came out. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, you could say we call it whatever you want, but you can't call it a React. Okay? So what happened was, when word of this broke on the internet, people went crazy all over social media, all over YouTube. They were like, these guys are scumbags. These guys, first of all, are already rich. The Fine brothers started making this whole series of videos on YouTube that made them rich. Okay? By the way, it's all staged. It was literally proven to all be staged content. It was never real reacting at all. It was all actors acting in a certain way that was scripted. Okay? So they're filthy rich from this content. Now they want to make it so no one else can ever make React content ever. So what happened was they got such bad reputation. They came out with this big apology campaign. We're so sorry. We swear that's not what it was. Please believe us. In fact, you know what? Here, we'll cancel it. And they did. They actually canceled their attempt to do the trademark or the patent or whatever it was. But it was too late. Their reputation was destroyed so badly, people didn't want to watch their videos anymore. And from what I'm to understand, they actually had to sell their company off so that people would, like, you know, not basically completely destroy their YouTube channel. They had to sell it to someone else to run. Now, I'm sure they made insane amounts of money on it and they didn't give a fuck, right? But in this case, why are you trying to patent something that's general? The Game Awards. Like, dude, you should be happy, all right? Literally, you should be happy that people even watch your show. You came out of nowhere. You were a games journalist that was covering things like E3 and shit. And then somehow you came on to money. Don't ask me how he came on to his money. It's weird that he's a games journalist and the next day he has enough money to finance shows. But he starts financing this Game Awards and he starts doing Summer Game Fest. And he just so happens to do it right place, right time, where E3 is floundering and dropping the ball and flubbing it all. And he picks up the reins for E3 and basically shows that they don't need to exist anymore. So now he gets all this newfound attention and a big positive push from the gaming community. And good on him. You know, right place, right time. That's the same as my story. You know, I didn't do anything that I feel, you know, rethought anything or whatever. I was just at the right place at the right time, making improv commentary videos on YouTube over gameplay. And it took off and it inspired a hell of a lot of people to make that style of content over the years. And here I am 16 years later, still able to make a living doing it. And I'm very grateful for that. But hell, if I tried to do that 5 years ago, I would have failed. If I tried to do it 10 years ago, I would have failed. I feel like he was just completely right place, right time, and somehow had the money to do it. I don't know if he found investors who just believed in him or whatever, but here he is, running the Game Awards every year. He's very much trying to make it the Oscars of gaming, right? And he wants that notoriety. Who knows if he'll get it? And he wants to now patent it. And now people are flipping out.